Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley, and this is the final episode of 2022. We're welcoming back our good friend, Conor McGoey from InsideUp Games, the publisher of Earth, Block and Key, Summit, and many, many more. Conor, welcome back to the binge. How you doing, sir?
Hey James, good. Thanks for having me back.
Hey, no problem. You know, it was an obvious choice for the end of the year episode to have you. We always have great conversations on and off air, so I thought we can get into some of the stuff that's going on in the industry. But first and foremost, I just want to say again, last time we talked, you were just in the heat, I think, of doing Earth. And now we're past that. I think the Kickstarter itself hit like 731,000, I think, on Kickstarter. Obviously, late pledges and things like that probably pushed much further than that. Man, that's got to be just a great feeling for you.
It's been a crazy couple of years. I was like a couple others, I believe, 2018 or whenever it even was now, 2019, pre-pandemic. I had lined stuff up and I like, okay, I missed Windows by just a little bit just from bad luck. And I was like, okay, going into 2020, I've timed everything perfectly. This is going to be the make or break year for us. We're going to do this. And then things shut down, and it was a little rough in there. But then we had Block and Key hit Kickstarter, and that did well enough for me to think, okay, maybe we can make this work. And I had enough irons in the fire to kind of keep things going. And then Earth hit earlier this year.
Was there a moment of doubt there for you then? So before Block and Key, were you like, this is it? Like I'm either I hang up the gloves if this isn't working, or
like it's been so. As we probably talked about in previous discussions, I used to run a construction company. And so it's just been a couple, 4 or 5 years of just, tightening the belt. And I ran out of belt holes. So I started punching more and just get that belt tighter. I got to the point pre-Block and Key where I was literally like, I don't know. Like I've been putting my family through this. I'm the primary breadwinner. And it's just like, it's hard. Like it's very hard. Luckily, we're in an inexpensive city in Northern Ontario, but still, there was for sure me looking in the classified ads, being like, no, I don't think I'm making enough waves. And then Block and Key kind of gave me that little bit of a glimpse to the horizon of like, oh, like maybe I made enough of a wave, enough of a name, like just trying to be good, trying to be transparent, trying to be honest, trying to give good deals to my backers, trying to be supportive and open and transparent. But there was 110% big moments of doubt prior to that. And that helped bridge the gap. And like I say, I already had irons in the fire. I had my own designs going. I had signed other designers' works to be published. So like I had commitments that I had to honor anyways. And I can't even remember the timing anymore. It's been such a blur, but Earth was probably already locked and loaded in development at that time. And I knew like Maxim, the designer, and I, we were both well aware that Earth was going to be big. We did not expect it to be as big as a Kickstarter because people didn't know it. But having played the game many, many times and falling in love with it, we knew it was going to be big. So our expectation was to have like a small Kickstarter, like most of mine. They'd overfund by a little bit. Nothing crazy, no CMON Kickstarters, but we'd overfund. We'd make the game, we'd get it out, and then once people started playing it, then we were confident we'd sell that first print run out, make a small print run, have a second Kickstarter for the reprint, and that would have been the big explosion. But we cut a year and a half off that timeline by just exploding out of the gate. So again, by good and bad luck throughout the pandemic with the rise of digital board games, so TTS and Tabletopia and all that sort of stuff. I mean, yes, they were a thing before, but they definitely, from a publisher's point of view, they grew tremendously during that time period, as a lot of our game designs and testing and development were done on those platforms. So leading into that, we had issues getting our European copy to some localization partners. It was being held up in customs because they always do it to me only when it matters. When I have tons of time, it just slides through. But as soon as I need it somewhere, it gets stopped in customs. But anyways, because of that, I reached out to Ken, who runs Coded Cardboard, who does our scripted TTS mods for us, all of them for us.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he's fantastic. So I reached out to him, did the rundown, and he created the TTS mod of Earth, scripted to make it really easy for people to play. And as I'm sure you've played it, one of the beautiful things about Earth is it plays quickly and it's very, very fulfilling. Like it's an enjoyable process, win or lose. And it's a great game. So people were able to play it during the campaign, leading up to the campaign, after the campaign, and it just grew this grassroots hype and excitement around the game. And that hype, as you know, starts the whole hype train going, and then localization partners get in. And then once they loved it, then they started telling all their localization partners. It's just one of these things where, like, the fire just spread really wildly. And it was really good for us. And that was, I can remember, February, March of this year.
Yeah. Then so a few things just unpack in there. So let me jump in, because I know you got a lot, but let me jump in there. So the first of all, Block and Key. I'm going to go right back to the Block and Key.
Yeah.
I backed that game. I got my copy. I absolutely love that game. That game is phenomenal. And congrats to you on that. What's that?
A Southern Ontarian, David Van Drunen, also from Southern Ontario. Yeah. He's a phenomenal sweetheart of a guy. He had actually pitched me a game, the breakout prior to the Origins. So this is maybe 2018. I can't remember, 2018 maybe. Yeah. He pitched me a game, and I took it back to Thunder Bay, ran it through my testers, didn't go over well, sent it back to him, and kind of thought, like, well, I'd be surprised if I see him again. Like, maybe I've hurt his feelings by turning his game down. That's all I thought. At that Origins, I believe I was the first person he came and saw when he showed me Block and Key. At the time, it was called Martian Metropolis. And he came by and he set up. I mean, he had built the box, like the two standing box at that time on his own. He had 3D printed all the blocks. And he sat down, he explained it, and he set it up. And the first 30 seconds, my brain latched on. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to sign this game. Yeah, like this is right up my alley. Like, I love it. And he with the game design, he did such a good job. And then working with Ed Duval's, the illustrator, and then really trying to combine that world and then utilizing the box, the sports, putting all the rules on there. So it works. It's
super cool.
I'm very proud.
For people that don't know the game, it's like almost like a 3-dimensional Tetris, right? And when you're scoring based on your 2D view of that board. But it's different for the persons that are looking from other angles on the other side of the table. I have that in my game bag, no joke. Every single week, I go to a game night just south of me here in Newmarket, and our meetup is open to the public. It's through meetup.com. Anybody can come. And there's always different levels of skills, right? And people that are newer to the industry and people who've been in the industry for a while and in the hobby. And I always have that in my game bag because there's always somebody that wants to borrow it. I mean, the table presence looks great. It's fun. The tiles, I've actually had somebody say to me, are these tiles clay? I'm like, I think they are clay. Like they are not cheap plastic. Like this is...
They were a nightmare.
I know they're the bane of your existence, because at the time I'm like, dude, don't worry about the grout.
I was worried about the grout. I was worried about so many things. But that's another thing. And again, the Kickstarter backers were amazing, because that those blocks were 3 years in the making to get them right. Yeah. And each time there was a delay for like the weight was wrong, the friction was wrong, the consistency was wrong, the paint adhesion was wrong, whatever it was. Like this type of clay had never been done this way before. So just over and over, every time I had to write a Kickstarter update, just been like, guys, I'm sorry. And every time there's like that little devil at the back of my brain, be like, you've waited too long. Just, it's fine. Let it go. And I'd push back and be like, no, like, we've waited this long. We have to keep, and I'd send the email out and like the update, just waiting for this like wrath. And it never came. Everyone's always like, thank you so much. We appreciate you keeping us updated. That's great. We're happy to wait. Like, it was always met with love. And so
that's a good point. I had that on one of the games. Same thing. I had sent out and I said, guys, I just got samples from the manufacturer. They do not pass what I would deem acceptable in terms of quality. I'm so sorry, but this is going to delay things by like 3 weeks. But we got to get it right. And literally everyone's like, thank you. Thank you for not just putting crap in a box, but trying to get something that
and explaining what happened, why there's a delay, and that it will be for good, and like that's all they want. And just keep them informed.
Yeah. Is there going to be a set? Like, are you going to do another? Like, I gotta believe you're going to do another Kickstarter on that one, like a second edition, or no?
Oh, a Block and Key. Interesting.
Yeah.
So very likely. But it's also might be the start of a world on its own that I'll just tease that for now.
Interesting.
I think there might be more.
Yeah, that for sure I could see like a reprint, right? Like it's
for sure.
It seems obvious.
Yeah.
Just from the reaction of people when I play this game. So that's that one. Now on Earth, you're talking about TTS scripting. So just for the audience members who don't know what we're talking about, Tabletop Simulator is a digital format, much like Board Game Arena, Tabletopia, where you can go and do a digital version of a board game. You can play it almost like you're sitting around a table. However, some of the constraints with that system is that you're having to physically pick up cards and like deal them one at a time yourself. And so doing things as simple as board game setup, can be quite onerous and be a barrier to people wanting to play, right? Because if you're going to spend 30 minutes trying to set up the game in a digital environment, that really sucks. You kind of just want to get and start playing. So TTS scripting is usually, you'll find there's experts out there that do that. You hire them, they'll go in and they'll script these things. So you literally hit a button, everything will basically deal out and set up the table for you based on your player count, and then you can get going and start playing. And then other things like a button might help deal off a certain number of cards like into the market and things like that. So just for people that don't understand what that is. So Earth, so you that was now got you to go on your own, right? So Block and Key, Glimmer of Hope.
So I was on my I was on my own for a while now. Like this has been my full-time job probably for, I'm gonna say, at least 4 years.
Yeah.
But again, like, it was that new business thing of like, I would just put all the money back in the company.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of years in there where I literally paid myself $0. Like, I made no money in a year. And luckily I live in Canada. And luckily I live in a very inexpensive town. And my previous job had paid up for a lot of the, like, for our vehicles, for our home, for stuff like that. So we didn't have a lot of ongoing expenses, there's no way InsideUp Games would survive. If I was in even a different Canadian city with higher rent or mortgage rates.
Not like Vancouver or something, right?
Oh God, in Toronto. Yeah, no thanks. So I was on my own, but it was getting dark. It was getting rough in the middle. The company was still doing good. The company had money, but just from a personal side of just like working as hard as I work and trying to stay as positive and like offer good deals, and people complain about stuff all the time, right? But anyways, always trying my best and just feeling like I wasn't making headway.
Yeah.
So it did get dark, and then it brightened up a little with Block and Key, and then the sun certainly came out with Earth, that's for sure.
Certainly, I think that the difference between those two is one is gives hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the other one gives resources, right? And so
you're 100% true.
Yeah,
that's 100% accurate, because for me before, until early this year, it was basically like me working out of my home in an office that was literally, 3 feet wide, or sorry, deep, and 10 feet wide. So like, it's me, my desk, and I'm up against it. Like, look at the old videos. Like right last time I was on your show, maybe.
Yeah.
I was probably still in that office, right? Where you can see the walls are right behind me. I'm in a different room now, but whatever. So like, it was just me. That is it. Like, low overhead, just like keep it in the business. But now it's like, okay, I have, at that point with both Block and Key, we have 10 titles in InsideUp Games catalog. Plus I have 4 more signed games of outside designers. Plus I have 3 more of my own designs. So there's too much going on. I brought on my first employee last year, Chris. I'm gonna mess up dates for sure. So for a while I was paying him and I wasn't paying myself, just to keep stuff going. Then I brought in 2 more employees, Jenna and Caitlin, earlier this year in February. Then once Earth went well, and I kind of like, there's just so much work to manage everything about Earth and our existing catalog, and then also setting us up for their future games coming out, that they were just like, I just had too much on my plate. So I have a local office now. I have 2 local employees as well. So there's 3 of us here locally full time. And it's been a change. But again, like, it's weird, because before I didn't have almost any overhead and very few stresses, and I was just stressed about feeding my family. Where now I'm stressed about making sure that I have enough work to feed the families of the employees that I've now hired. So the stress has just kind of changed, but I'm still very grateful. I love the office. It's super close to the house, so I walk my kids to school every day, and I walk to the office afterwards. They come by, they do their homework in the boardroom. Like,
that's cool.
Yeah, it's really nice.
It allows you to scale too, right? Because when you're on your own, there's only so much you can do. Like, your time is finite, right?
And again, that old saying, "Jack of all trades, master of none," is true. Like, I've self-taught for most things. I have a lot of skills that I was able to carry over from different jobs. When I worked in film, when I worked as a project manager in construction, all these different things helped me very much with the job I'm doing. But I was also scratching the surface. So like, here's a fire, put it out, get this ready, get that ready, and another fire, put that out. Whereas now I have different, columns or silos of tasks. So for example, Hudson, who's doing all of basically the CFO duties, like, he's doing all the A&R, he's doing all, like, everything I need for invoicing, for forecasting. So I don't even have to think about it. But it also means he's now been able to like delve deeper into it, and he's now looking at government grants, because we're, again, Northern Ontario, so there's assistance because of the small town that we're in, and because we're trying to bring more business to the town. So like, he's been able to go down these avenues that I haven't been able to do. Or Carter, my other local employee, he's able to just like, he's got this beautiful mind brain where he just sees the numbers. He sees a game purely from the number sides, whereas I'm all about like feeling gut. and pure enjoyment, where he'll look at it and he'll find like feedback loops that are broken, and he's there to rip things apart. So like now I'm also more confident that like our rule books are tighter, the games are going to be better tested, like everything about the company is going to be better, which is a really nice feeling. And it's like it's one of the things that you literally just you can't do it on your own.
No, that's awesome. And you've done both GameFound and Kickstarter now too, right? You've been in both
That's
those
right. So
worlds.
we've done
Yeah.
roughly 9 Kickstarters and one game found.
And can you give us kind of a snippet as to the difference between those two, and what was your experience with one versus the other?
Boiled down very simply, uh, Kickstarter was like the known evil. Like the limitations of Kickstarter, and but I was and I continue to be very comfortable in that sandbox. I know the little intricacies and the issues and I know how to work within that. And I'm also very appreciative because it's 100% because of Kickstarter where I am and what I'm able to do
Yeah.
today. Um, so yeah, so I'm happy with Kickstarter. The one issue that we had was going back a little ways, I didn't have a point of contact at Kickstarter.
Mm.
So any inquiries and issues I had, it was never much of a priority. Luckily, within this past year, I have a really good point of contact, John, over at Kickstarter, and he's fantastic. He comes from a small publishing background as well, very personable guy. He himself helped us unload stock at Gen Con when it would arrived late. Like he just happened to be walking by the booth and he saw me heading out, so he came and literally moved boxes with me. Like
Oh
he's
wow.
just a nice guy,
Yeah.
and that's been really helpful. But the issue that I had at the time was the previous person, who doesn't need to be named, at Kickstarter, they weren't super clear in the communication and they never wrote any more words in a sentence than they needed to. So I kept having to like get clarification, like, okay, Grant, you've said this, but like you've left all of this unsaid. And I'm
Yeah.
really trying to find out, like, I'm a game designer. Tell me the dang rules and I'll play within them, but I need
Yeah.
to know what those rules are. So there was an issue of how many live Kickstarters a creator can have, right? And there's a whole bunch of backstory to like, how many have you done? How many have you failed? What's your status? What's your record?
Is there a
Etc.
number? Or
So
is the answer
no,
it
there's a number.
depends?
Sorry, that's true. It depends on all of these things. So basically, like, they figured out like when you're just starting out, they really want to make sure that like new people have like fulfilled their first campaign before
Yeah.
launching their second. Like obvious stuff that's to protect their backers. But then as you grow, like okay, these people have repeatedly made their games and fulfilled them on time, sometimes early, sometimes a few months late. Like that timing isn't a big deal, but they're constantly going. They're issuing refunds when they're being asked. There's a bunch of stuff. And sorry, I don't have this checklist. They didn't send me a thing that says like these
Yeah.
are why you qualify or don't. But this is stuff that was verbally told to me about stuff that it's again it's there's a whole term for it. It's Kickstarter is like security and something else, like making sure that it's just safe for backers, safe for
Sure. Yeah.
creators.
I mean, if
So
people fail a campaign and they don't like, I've got, I think at least 6 games I've backed
mhm,
that are more than a year late, and
yeah,
I don't know if I'll ever get them. Right. So
yeah,
I get that because that can sour people on the platform.
for sure.
Um, so did they give you a number?
So yeah, they did. So for speaking for Inside Items personally, I hope I don't get in trouble saying this, but everybody is only allowed one live.
At a
You
time.
can never have more than one live being
Is there a
currently
cap
seeking
per
funding.
year though, or no?
Yeah, so for me, it's capped at 4. So
So
I
are,
need
so when they say live, it's basically if you pick a 30
seeking
day
funding.
campaign, after 30 days concludes, then you could potentially get into another campaign. Yeah.
Potentially, but they still like each time you launch, it's still like I still have to go through the same
Yeah.
verification checks. They still have to submit everything online. There's still like a delay, and there's been more delays. When I first started and I had all my stuff ready to go, the submission and approval process was always very quick for me, luckily. But in the last couple of years, it's been taking longer and longer,
Yeah.
which is fine because they probably also have more projects than ever that they have to check. Um, but yeah, so basically, and for us speaking personally, like there's always going to be at least 2 to 3 months in between our launches, anyways.
Yeah.
One for sanity,
Yeah.
it's just nuts. It's nuts. But also just for timing, like that, we take this platform very seriously. As it's our main, it's one of our main funding sources and our main marketing sources. And we always want to try to be honest, open, and transparent.
Yeah.
So we don't want to be, like look like we're playing the cup games with backers or their money or anything like
Yeah.
that. Like we want to keep it very clear. So we've been told 4, that's 1 live and 3 like in manufacturing slash fulfillment. Um, but we're hoping to get to that point because that's also a ton. Like it's more of a we're aiming to do probably 2 to 3 per year. But even currently, last year I was trying to do Earth, Draft Right Records, and Terminus. But then because Trey Parker named Summit his number one game of all time, it meant that Summit sold out for us. So then we're like, oh crap. The Summit expansion, that was the Sanity expansion
Okay.
that we did on GameFound
Yeah.
this year, was slated for next year. But then we're like, okay, now bring that pot forward. It's now on the front burner. Let's finish this out. Let's get that going. But because of the timings and everything, we couldn't get it onto Kickstarter. So at that point, okay, let's try GameFound. And unfortunately, for some miscommunications with my lovely backer kit representatives, I'm like, you know who I'm talking to. The backer kit crowdfunding wasn't mentioned at the time, so my
Yeah.
option was either Kickstarter or GameFound. Um, yeah, no offense to any other platforms out there, but those were my obvious
Sure.
options. I had a really good project manager on GameFound, Luke Pryor. He was by far the best part of my GameFound experience. Just one heck of a nice guy, super communicative, really open, honest, very helpful. My first meeting with him at GameFound was better than 4 years of no meetings with Kickstarter people.
Wow.
Luckily, like I said, John has since come in, and John's a really great point of contact with me.
Yeah.
Luke was by far my best point of contact at GameFound. He was fantastic. That said, one of the hardest things for me was twofold, and then they also like they smash into each other.
Yeah.
Was that I didn't know the system very well, but also I now had a team, and I'm trying to get those silos of tasks to different team members. So one of Jenna, who's been amazing, one of her things has also been taking over kind of the day-to-day management of Kickstarters
Yeah.
for us. So it was kind of, not only was I not well versed in the platform, but I'm also have someone new, like basically managing it for the company, so I could be focusing on localization partners and such and things like that. So unfortunately, speaking personally, it wasn't a great experience for me. There was just too many, I didn't know enough. There were too many hurdles, too many small things. There's a lot of really good ideas in the platform that
Yeah.
Kickstarter could learn from. But some of them on GameFound, personally, I don't think are the way it was finally done and presented isn't quite as good as it could be. So everybody, you'll hear Kickstarter creators talk about the annoyance of creating the project story or the campaign page, right? They call it your story.
Then you have to
Or
recreate it
building
all
it,
again.
and
Yeah.
you have to put all those little things in there. There's always a stupid space that is in there, so you can't have like flowing art. And if you do make flowing art, it has to be done with white flowing art because it's the only way to hide those white spaces. That like, there's little like right things like
Yeah.
that. So GameFound has its own thing where you can like individually do it. One of the things they do really well is they break it into individually linked with like chapters
Yeah.
that you can share. So I could directly share you my shipping page. I could directly share like that. All that little like breakdown is super helpful from the visual side point. But on the back end, updating it and creating it where it's like you scroll through, and then within the scroll there's another sub box that you can scroll within, and then getting it to drop the video in the top instead of the middle or the bottom. Like there's just little like
Yeah.
maintenance things that end up being kind of frustrating. So yeah, so that said, I know other people who have loved it. Also for us, Summit Sanity did well on GameFound. To be totally transparent, not as well as I'd kind of hoped it was going to do, and
Yeah.
it still did very well. I am in no way complaining. I was just really hoping to continue off of the hype train of what Trey Parker's stuff did, and it did. It for sure helped us. But I had Summit, Yeti, and Teams Kickstarter supporters over on Kickstarter, and I'm not sure how many we were able to pull over onto GameFound. So would it have been?
I don't know
Kickstarter?
how much crossover there is. I mean, I had
Right.
a Planting Evidence we launched on GameFound and ended up pulling it after like 3 days because our like our subs went to zero, right?
And the thing is that I think it's also the type of game. Like, I don't think you're like
Yeah,
if
it was a
Planet
casual
Evidence had
game.
a whole bunch of minis in it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it was a casual game. It's a wrong platform, like in terms of the ecosystem there. But when I went to move those backers over to Kickstarter, there's only a handful that actually transitioned over, right? So to me, the kind of the Venn diagram of those two is, there's like a sliver where I think those things cross over, and that's when you get into, like you said, heavier games with minis and RPGs and things like that. But I still think Kickstarter is probably the king of the castle in terms of the audience, right? Like it has a built-in audience. It's just absolutely massive. Where people that are using it, they know how to use it, and the idea of going to another platform might be too foreign for them today. Maybe not in the future, where it really has to make you think: is this the right game for this platform or not? I echo your
Especially
sentiment. There's a lot of cool features in there. There's a lot of quirks too that I didn't like, but there's a lot of cool features that's not
yeah,
in Kickstarter. Right? It's almost like you want both platforms to kind of merge
right.
and
Learn
take
from
the
each other.
best of both, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's for sure. That for sure that's the case. And the other thing is for Inside of Games in particular, like we're trying to have very much like a not necessarily just a family, but a family plus feeling of our games, right? Where like they
Yeah.
are accessible, they are open, they are more for the wider audience, even for Draft Right Records, which I'm is doing better after the Kickstarter than it did on Kickstarter, which is
Well,
great, but it's like it's getting more love now. And maybe that's also because of it only did okay on Kickstarter, where the gameplay it's and supposedly it's themed, supposedly music games from what we've seen and been told that they don't do well,
yeah.
but the gameplay itself is phenomenal. Like it's such a great game. And again, I think once we get it out into people's hands, it's going to do a lot better for us. But it's still, like I say, it's weird that's doing better after the campaign than during the campaign. But with Kickstarter, my hope at the time had been like, okay, there's still that wider audience. Maybe we could get some music lovers in there to back the game. Maybe we can get right people, movie lovers, people from different genres. There's more chance of someone walking down the hallway and stumbling across your room on Kickstarter coming from some other background than there is on GameFound.
Yeah, your organic search definitely seems much higher
Mm-hmm.
on Kickstarter than there was on GameFound. So we'll be watching them. We'll see how they evolve.
Yeah.
When you look back at 2022, other than being extremely grateful, which I think we all are, and it's been a tough year for a lot of people. So
Mm-hmm.
you have to celebrate those wins. But looking at this industry as a whole, as it's now coming out of COVID, and I think a lot of things changed during COVID, right? Where things typically it was a disruptor, right? Anytime something
Mm-hmm.
major happens, any major event, it's a disruptor and forces change. Is there any changes that you're seeing in the industry that you want to comment on, or where do you see, or what are some of the changes you do see in the industry? I guess I would say that coming out of COVID versus pre-COVID when you started.
I guess the most obvious one would be like the slow and growth. Like pre-COVID, the growth numbers were just insane. Like every year we were producing more board games and more expansions than the
Mm,
year before. Like it was insane where we've come in the last 20, 30 years. And actually I was just shared a graph recently and it shows the drop because of COVID and how like the drop of new games and expansions coming out because of the economy, because of COVID, because of the cost of goods, because of the cost of freight that went up through the roof,
yeah,
because of the economy tightening up, because of interest rates, for all these reasons, just as everyone's kind of like slow down a little bit. So that's probably one of the most obvious ones. Speaking on a personal level, one of the things that's kind of a surprise to me as well, within the last, so the first conference Inside of Games went back to, or convention, would have been PAX last year. So PAX 2021. I can't
yeah.
remember what year it is anymore. So we've been back for about a year of conventions. And it's been interesting to see some of the small, mid-sized companies that just aren't there anymore, or have since folded.
Mm,
But speaking personally, also the amount of people that kind of come to me to talk for advice, for assistance, whereas I still think of myself as relatively small in the overall scheme
yeah.
of things. But also people are like, oh, we've actually been around, 6, 7 years now, so we've been around a while. So like we're more of a more well-known face and brand than I thought we were.
What's your thoughts on AI? I mean, everywhere I look now, whether you're on TikTok or whether you
You're in
listen to
pain.
forums or even on Facebook, there's different camps on the use of AI. And you as a publisher, do you see it fitting in anywhere in your model going forward?
I do. And I know we're both going to get hate mail from even no matter what camp we get in. You've set us up for failure. So thanks, James. I'm having video issues. Losing.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but again, and it's like I understand. So it drives my wife crazy. If she could hear this, she'd be laughing her butt
Yeah,
off. But like I love arguing and I love arguing both sides. Like I
yeah,
love a good discussion. So I usually like taking the side of the side that's either underrepresented or like misunderstood or like not the popular one, just to challenge people.
yeah.
But that being said, the AI art is insane. It is impressive. Yes, I understand how it works. Yes, I understand the problems in it. The one thing that I find very interesting, and speaking again personally for the company, is about what would it be now? Almost a year ago. So as a publisher and an art director, I'm often looking through different forums for art. I get a ton of artists submitting their portfolios all the time, but I also reach out to random people quite often online, just being like,
Yeah.
holy crap, I love this art style. If you're ever interested in doing a board game, please reach out. And sometimes I get no response. Sometimes I've got response from people that are like insanely like well renowned. And then I'm just like, well, I can't even come close to affording part of what you would cost.
Yeah.
But I reached out to this young lady who's did beautiful, beautiful work on Instagram. And I reached out and she was very transparent that she does a lot of her work using AIs. I can't remember which of the platforms she uses, but she shares that and she tags it when she does it. But it's really beautiful work. And the thing that I found interesting is I don't know which sources she pulled from or which keywords she used or how she did it, but she did show me the steps in the process. And she shows me kind of how she does it,
Yeah.
how it works, what it pulls, and then the work she does in Photoshop to then make these pieces of art, real pieces of art, instead of just a jumble that these things have done.
Yeah.
And again, things go really, really fast, but it was a year ago or so. And yes, there's been leaps and bounds, and I'm sure everyone's familiar with the Facebook filters that everybody's using now for AI images of themselves that everybody has.
Yeah.
But it wasn't that simple. Like she's still creating her own art built off of other things. I do understand that. But then she'd also like there'd be the obvious flaws. You'd see something and like half the head would be missing, or there'd be like an arm that just was like at a super strange angle.
Yeah,
And then
10
she would
fingers,
go through it and yeah, exactly. And then she'd fix it and make it. So it was beautiful. But it was a style of some of her posts that I'm like, I really think these are beautiful. But this is what she's made, and she's made this from these amazing artists. She's created her own piece of art.
Yeah.
I want her to make my art in this vein. So the argument that I have is none of these people that she's borrowed have made this art style. And I can say that pretty confidently because the theme I have for this game doesn't make a lot of sense nor exists.
Yeah.
And all of these well-known people that she's borrowing from would have drawn the stuff I'm asking for. So what I'm asking for is she took A through Z to get to number one of her. Now I want her to build, right, these sets off of what she has. So again, she's not pulling from here. So that's my issue of I find it sad for all the negativity. I do, and again, I have hired her to do a job. So I'm paying her as a creative. I'm not asking for any rate discounts. I'm not saying, hey, copy this well-known person and give me their art for cheaper. No, I'm saying, I like what you've done. I want your art. What is your price for your art? Okay, I'll pay you that price for your art. Right. So I find it a bit hard because of a lot of the frustration and naysayers towards AI would very simply say that like she's not an artist, she's not creative.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because there's a little bit of me like as a creative, as a game designer, I have to admit to being a creative person. I come up with board game ideas, I make them, I turn them into things. I do art direction on board games, but I'm not artistic. If you saw me draw, it would terrify you. I've always wanted to be able to draw and I can't. So maybe that's a little bit of me like projecting onto her that negativity that I feel or whatever it is. But I think it's kind of crappy that. And so to be transparent, she's completed the job and I've paid her for the job, but that project's on hold. So I'm like, there is so much vitriol and so much like anger in this, and she's aware of it. She's like, yeah, and she's like, honestly, like I'm not surprised at this that we've had to do this, and it sucks. It's like this is the first time she's done it. She's only ever done it for herself, for her friends, making D&D characters for her friends in the past.
Yeah.
And now like this is something that she could have been excited about. She could be like, like here's a paid gig. Like like I say, she's a wonderful young lady, a stay-at-home mom of 2 kids, and like there's something she's able to do while also taking care of her kids. And now she's devalued because she wasn't taught traditionally in a school and didn't have years to develop her own method. So I'm not in any way saying that these traditional artists shouldn't be valued, right? I'm not asking her to rip off someone's style. I'm asking her to play within the own style that she's developed using these tools. Sorry.
I was gonna say,
as you could tell, I do
very passionate. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's frustrating to me because and it's true of so many different avenues that humans have done and different creatives have used. Even if you think of the illustrators who just work digitally nowadays.
Yeah.
And how much easier, and I'm not saying it's easy, I'm saying how much easier it would be for them to erase or recolor something than it would for someone working in paints, right? It's how things change. And I think what we'll see a new subset of skills reading directly towards that AI and how people use it. I'm going to mess up all the famous people who did it, but the Campbell soup I can't remember who's the artist who did the Campbell soup prints.
Oh, what's his name?
See, I know exactly. Anyways, right? No one
Warhol.
said, "Hey, yeah." No one send him hate mail for saying you're ripping off Campbell's.
Yeah.
He took something from society and turned it into something else, similar to what these people are doing, right? So I think it's just a matter of time before this becomes more commonplace, and our artists and illustrators will then learn to play in it as well, right? There might be a mesh of like original art drawn in front of AI backgrounds that are generated. It's a new sandbox that can be played in, and it might make put some people out of work. It might either give some people work. Like I think people just need to be kind. I don't understand why people need to be so angry at people all the time.
Yeah, I think the genie's out of the bottle, right? It's not going back in, and so I get into this debate almost weekly with people at my game night and other colleagues online. No, I don't type online, but just chatting. I'm chatting with people, right? I avoid writing anything down. I know better than that, because then you just get a tsunami of people responding. But I look at it like when you look the digital example you gave. If I go back, 20 years ago, before digital art became a thing, I think that was an inflection point when people at that time were saying that's not real art. You're not using a brush. You're not using paint. You're not, that you're using a computer to help you. Mm-hmm. If I look in my business, when I've done certain creative work, on the marketing side, and I'm hiring a graphic designer, what's the graphic designer doing? They're going on to Shutterstock. Right? They're getting assets from Shutterstock, whether it be iconography. Maybe they go on to flaticon.com, grab some icons. They'll go grab images from Shutterstock, and then they will do a composition using those elements to create something new. And I see AI as, quite frankly, a shorthand version of doing that. It is a tool that's allowing that process to speed up. Just like, using Microsoft Illustrator or Photoshop today is way faster than it was 10 years ago. As the technology improves, it is going to give people the ability to output more in a shorter period of time. If I look at board games, give the example of board games. You and I are both board game designers, but I can promise you every one of your games has a mechanic that you didn't invent, right? That's come from another game somewhere else. Does that make you a fraud? Does that make you a ripoff artist? No, you've taken something else, you recombined it with this thing over here, you've added some new ideas, and you combine it into something new with a different theme. So that's how I kind of approach it. And I think a lot of people are getting caught up in the word art. And so what I try to say is, instead of referring to AI as art, I refer to it as graphic design, right? So computer-assisted graphic design. And when you look at it from that vein, where I'm not trying to say this is art, because that's where people get really upset and start saying, well, that, is it art or is it not? And there's been tons of videos, as of late, where people are having debates if something art or not. Is it graphic design? And I think most people can say, well, yeah, that is graphic design. And I've used it myself in a couple of areas. One is when we were doing Cities of Venus, I had a vision for how I wanted this city to float in the clouds. Mm-hmm. And like you, I can't draw. So at the time I was using, I think it was Wombly, the Wombly app. And I kept, doing iterations until I got something that was kind of what I was trying to visualize. Put it into Photoshop, because I happen to be very good at Photoshop. Manipulated, photoshopped it. Then I sent that to the artist and said, this is an idea of what I'm trying to create. This is a mock-up for you. Now go create something in your style that matches this.
Yeah, and I think that's a good vein that's going to work too.
Yeah. So as a shorthand, I think for people doing mock-ups to help somebody else, as a shorthand between individuals saying, this is where I'm trying to go, I think it helps there. Another area we needed is we had to do, we're doing prototypes for, again, Cities of Venus. We added 2 cards. It's a 2-month process for me to get 2 new pieces of art for those 2 cards. What did we do? We took the body of artwork that we had, put it into the AI, Midjourney, right? And said, crank out the 2 cards that do these 2 things using this style. Yeah, Midjourney cranked those 2 cards out, again, into Photoshop, because there's a lot of work in Photoshop to then make it kind of work and fit what we're trying to do. But still, it's a mock-up. It's there as a placeholder until, because I need these, we were out of time. We had to get the prototypes done. Now I've got the time to go to the artist and say, hey, I had created these 2 cards. This is kind of what I'm looking for. Can you redo these in your design? So when we have the final game, it'll be in that person's design. So, again, a shorthand. On the flip side, and I want to take this now to the other side of the extreme, I think it's now a tool where people who would never, ever get into game design or would never have the resources to reach out to artists or the funds can now, at a very small scale, create something that looks good enough you can put on a table and play with people. And I think that's a good thing because it's going to allow more people to get into board game design. We've got a game that we're working on. It's probably going to come out sometime next year. Straight to retail. We're not going to do Kickstarter. It's a small game. There is no budget for that game at all, but it was a cool design. I was working with a colleague of mine who created the game, and I said, look, I'd love to help publish this for you, but we don't have a lot of budget to put behind this. It's a quick filler game. There's no way we can justify the price point, put this on Kickstarter. This thing is going to be cheap and dirty, man. We're going to have to do it as cheap as we can. So we did a combination of graphic design for box art, like the outside box artwork, but the cards on the inside, all AI generated, right? And we use Midjourney. So we're going to see what kind of vitriol is going to come out of that. So at least I'm going to put it out there. Of course, we're going to say, graphic design with the assistance of, we're never going to say art. We're going to say graphic design with the assistance of Midjourney. There was I would say a good 100 hours that still went into getting those images ready for, to be usable, right? So everything from the prompts, there was, I think, 270 prompts that went in to create the artwork through Midjourney. So you got to think how many days is involved in that. Then you've got characters coming with, like, as I said, extra limbs, 12 fingers, things like that. So a lot of Photoshop work to correct things because you can get some really scary things out of the AI. But we've got it to a point where it looks good on a table, and it's not going to be an expensive game, but it's something we're going to put out there for people to enjoy, and we're going to do that next year. And then yes, we'll let the hate flow in and see where it lands. But I think you got to try, right, and see where these tools may work and where they may not. This is one I think. Again, I think it's playing with fire, doing something like that on Kickstarter probably. For now, but again, as you said, with your artist, that attitude could change 6-9 months from now, right? Like the AI is getting so good that we're gonna get to a point where even people that do the videos for Kickstarter, that job is gonna be eliminated. Like AI is the next generation of AI is the prompts can generate video for you. Right?
That's insane.
So you got to think, and like Facebook was doing this, and they're showing, like they said, show me a unicorn running on a beach with, a beach ball in the foreground. The thing's running for about 50 seconds. Next thing you know, you've literally got a video of a unicorn running on a beach with a beach ball in the foreground. Like that's how fast this technology is moving, and we can't stop it, right? So then if you can't stop something, where the opportunity is to say, okay, well, we're ways that we can to use this tool in a way that A is honest, right? So being upfront with people saying this is what we did. We're not trying to pass it off for something that's not. And two, I think, opening up the conversation, letting people be involved with it. But I think on your camp is, I don't think it's constructive, right? For people just to start slinging mud back and forth. And like, I think the discussion is it art or not? That discussion's already passed. Now this discussion is, how can we utilize this in a tool that's in a way that is respectful for the industry and can help lift everybody up?
As long as no one names it Skynet, we should be fine. Right?
Touche. All right. So one last thing I want to catch is Terminus. It's a game you got coming up. Can you tease this at all? Like you dropped the name. I've got on the thumbnail. It looks super cool, but I know nothing about the game. So tell me about this game.
So this is by Tom and Earl. They're from Southern Ontario. This was pitched to me during one of these. I can't remember which one it was now, but during like a pitch event where a bunch of publishing companies went in there and just had like these groups out of these designers for like 5 minutes, like boom, boom, pitch. And it had enough to hook my interest back then. So we set up some online tests, and they did a really good job of doing their own TTS mod of it. So we played it, and it is by far the heaviest game InsideUp Games has ever done.
Okay.
It is the thickest. It is a Euro with a rondel, and it's all about planning the building of your subway lines. So you're creating your subway lines in a city, and you're going around the rondel, getting the resources you need, and planning your actions, and buying your developments and stuff like that. And it's really, really good. I mean, it's one step above where we normally, like I say, we normally in that kind of sit in that family plus range of games. And this is that little bit harder. It's a little bit more for the more fine-tuned Euro gamer. but it's good. It's really good. It's one of those games where as you're playing it, you're just trying to like look and plan and calculate stuff. And I think maybe it was from the planner in me, the construction
Yeah.
in me that like sees stuff. Like, I need to make sure that if I can get, like, I need to make sure I have my, my engineering plans and stuff. I have that. I have construction. When I have enough rails, if I have enough rails to get to like and then you do something, you're usually spending more time cursing yourself for like not planning properly or missing an opportunity than you are for like at somebody else, because subway lines can still intersect. You're still it's still a competitive game, but it's more often like me like misplanning or mismanaging or anything like that. There's not luck in it. There's variable markets as people are buying resources. The costs go up as they be sold back in the market. The costs come down. It's a whole bunch of really fun mechanics in there. But they makes it actually the game was so tight when they had designed it. They've spent years on it. That we actually spent probably the last year and a half through development, like softening it a little bit, because so many times in the game where you'd be short $1. Like, God, if I only had that $1. And then so we're just like to make it a little bit less punishing for players, especially new players. It's really good, and we'll have a scripted TTS mod for people to play as well. It's good. So then that should be hitting Kickstarter. I think the plan is March.
Oh, so this will be the next big one you guys do?
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. And can people play it? Like, if somebody wants to play it right now, can they do the TTS version of it, or?
They probably could by reaching out directly to Tom and Earl. Well, reach out to us at InsideUp Games, and we'll set them up. So Tom and Earl have theirs with their existing prototype artwork that they created. Very beautiful and simply beautiful graphic design for it, which is nice, and nothing to do with AI, just really nice graphic design. But Edu Valls, who's actually the same artist who did Block and Key for us, has done a similar yet completely different art styling for Terminus. So it's going to look quite different from people who are used to seeing Euros. So it can go one of two ways. We'll see, but I'm really excited about it.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, Conor, I want to wish you all the best on that campaign. I can't wait to see it. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year to you as well. This is now going to 2023. Well. I think it's going to be an exciting year for everyone. And to everyone that's listening, I want to wish you a very, very warm, Happy New Year. And we'll talk to everybody in the new year. Take care. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply subscribe to our YouTube channel, Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.